What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more J-drama score. And we're going to listen to a track from Lieutenant Fukuie's Greeting from 2014. I actually reacted to this soundtrack about a year and a half ago, though I didn't have the soundtrack back then. Allow me to explain. When I did that earlier reaction, I didn't have the CD, I just had the DVD box set. And there's a theme that plays, as I now know, in different variants, more on that in a moment, but there's a theme that plays in different parts of the show, especially or always during the end credit sequence at the end of every episode. And it just so happens that the DVD box set menu for the 3 discs plays that tune. So I was able to use the DVD menu screen to react to one of the tunes from the soundtrack. Now, I've since gotten the proper soundtrack CD, very happy about that, which has 29 tracks on it, by the way. But in that video, I also said the name of the series composer incorrectly, or I said a different composer. And the reason for that is, and as I explained in that video, this show is from 2014. In 2009, there was a one-off show that was, I don't know if it was Lieutenant Fukuie or just Detective Fukuie, but there was a one-off episode based on the same premise and the same characters. I'm guessing maybe it comes from a novel or maybe a manga. But a few years later, they decided to make a full series, but they recast everyone. So I don't know if maybe it was done by a different production company, but in 2014 they made a full 10-episode series of this show, and again, with different actors and actresses and a different series composer. Now, the series composer for the 2014 series is Yokoyama Masaru. So, again, I said the name of the 2009 episode composer by mistake, so clarifying all that. And as I realized, the track I reacted to then was not main theme as I labeled it for lack of a better name. It's a variant of one of the suites on the soundtrack. Now let me explain that. As I said, it has 29 tracks on there. There's a handful that are just singular, one-off. They're not related to any of the other tunes on the soundtrack. But the majority of the soundtrack are these clusters or suites of track variants, meaning there's like 4 or 5 track types that have 3 or 4 different variants over the course of the score. And some of them have different sections, some of them are more narrow, some of them are a bit longer. In some cases, there's one of the suites has like different tempos, so it's the same piano melody, but played very fast, and then in a different variant at a medium speed, and then in a different variant very slowly. So yeah, I've never seen a score/soundtrack like that before, where a lot of the tunes, like 20 or 22 of the tracks, are different variants of like 4 or 5 track types. So in any case, the tune I reacted to before is properly called Detective Fukuie Ending, and I've since renamed that video to reflect that. But we're going to listen to the very first track on the soundtrack, which is just called Detective Fukuie, and is indeed a different variant of the track you hear at the end. Now, the version we're going to hear here is the most extensive and multi-part version, or multi-part variant of this track type, meaning the end credit or the ending, Detective Fukuie ending track, it's just this chamber music with a Far Eastern feel, energetic tune. This track has that, but it also has an opening section that's a bit different, and it's a bit softer, and you're waiting for something to happen, and then after the main part, which again you hear in the ending version, it goes into like a different stripped down section, and then finishes with a flourish with the main theme again. So as I said, if you listen to the reaction I already did about a year and a half ago, you'll hear something very similar to what you're going to hear here, but this version is longer and has some different parts. So with all that in tow, let's hear it. This is from Lieutenant Fukuie's Greeting, Detective Fukuie, the first track on the soundtrack, which is done by Yokoyama Masaru and is from 2014. each other with those little melodies. I love it. Again, there's like 2 or 3 other versions that between this and the ending variant, and they're used at different times in the show. So yeah, I mentioned this in the older reaction, so I'll be brief here. But yeah, the show itself is about a detective who always asks questions. It's a how catch 'em, not a who done it, meaning we, the audience, see who perpetrated the crime from the very beginning, and it's just a question of how Fukui is going to use questions and persistence to get to the answer. It's modeled after Columbo, and indeed in the first episode one of the characters says to her, like, who are you, the Japanese Columbo? So yes, anyone who likes that show would surely be interested in this. And ultimately, it's an evolving show in terms of what happens between her and her superior, and obviously with the culprits in each individual case. But more than any other J-drama I've seen, or maybe even any other show, there's no reference to like what's happening in her personal life, or maybe that's not true. There's 1 or 2 comments that people make, but there's no superfluous activity. There's no like, oh, when she goes home, does she have a significant other, or what's up with her family? Literally, it's just the case and only the case. And the moment the case is solved, the show ends. The credits roll. Like, there's no epilogue, there's no, oh, what's going on with her and the other detectives at her place, or at the police station she works at. The episode just literally ends right away. So, in terms of its narrative stylings, it's quite unique among most of the J-drama that I've seen. What I do like about this track and several others, not just the different variants of this track type, but other tracks in the soundtrack, is that they have like Western instruments like, the violin and the contrabass and the cello, but also there's some Far Eastern instruments like plucked string instruments. There's like hand drums. There's even some tracks where it sounds like they're hitting wood instruments, like hitting the side of a cello or a contrabass with their hand to make the percussion sound. So there's a real creativity to the soundtrack. And yeah, what I enjoy again here is the way that main theme has a lot of power and drive to it, but there's that opening section where it's just kind of crawling up and working its way up to the energy of the main segment. Then it strips down a little bit and gets a little slow and uncertain and languid, and then it bursts forth into that theme again. So I like the composition of this track in particular, the sequencing of the sections, if you will. So again, shout out to, I always, because I'm always second guessing now if I'm going to say the right, yes, Yokoyama Masaru is the composer of this soundtrack. And shout out to Dan Ray, or Ray Dan, who plays Fukui herself. And yeah, like I said, there's some different track suites. The next tune I want to react to from this score/soundtrack is one of the variants of a suite of tracks that's like, they're often used when there's some real import or gravity to the scene, often near the end of the episode, once Fukui's figured out what's happening, but the culprit is still lying and pretending that they didn't do it. There are a suite of tracks that have this heavy ambience, and I don't know, you can feel sort of the moral rectitude of Fukui in these different tunes. So I'm going to react to one called The Perpetrator's Back. So that'll be the next one I do in this soundtrack. Let me know what you think of this, and I will see you next time. Peace.